Joining me now is Heritage Foundation and Heritage Action President Kevin Roberts. Kevin, good to see you. Thanks for being here. And you teach American history at UT Austin. What have you experienced? What can you tell us and give us your reaction to all of this?
Yeah, Maria, I'm a proud University of Texas alumnus and used to teach there and have a lot of friends there. What I can tell you is, unlike what has happened at Columbia, unlike what has happened at George Washington University in D.C., and unlike what's happening at UNC Chapel Hill, the administration has handled this very well. They warned the protesters that there would be severe consequences if they violated the right of other students to do what they're supposed to do, which is go to class. And so I really applaud President Jay Hartzell for the work that he's done there, and also applaud law enforcement for arresting these knuckleheads who eventually, Maria, let's just face it, are going to either intentionally or unintentionally implement violence against Jewish students. That's where all of this is going. It's not protected speech, and we need to draw a bright red line against it, like the University of Texas and like the University of Florida have done.
Yeah, I think that NYU took a similar tact, basically not having any of it. Calling the NYPD in and arresting them and finding that many of those people arrested were, in fact, outsiders. I know you've got an op-ed in the Epoch Times titled "The Struggle for the Soul of the GOP." And I want to get your take on how the GOP is handling this and how the White House is handling it. But in this op-ed, you're talking more about the border. In it, you write, how can a Republican-led House prioritize the borders of another country over our own border, even as American citizens are killed by illegal immigrants? Kevin, tell us more.
Well, look, these two things are connected. What we see at these universities, especially in blue states like New York, Maria, is the deterioration of institutions, the deterioration of truth. And the way that's connected to House leadership, even though I love my friend Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is that we've seen the deterioration of the Republican Party in D.C. as an institution. What I mean by that, Maria, is there is a huge disconnect between what they did several days ago with that supplemental package and what the American people, especially the conservative base, want to see done. And as you and I have talked about over the years, the main thing that needs to be done is the securing of the southern border. Therefore, just like there is a growing distrust of American universities, there's a growing distrust of Washington-based GOP establishment. And so what I was trying to do in that op-ed, what I will do until my last day on this earth, is remind the establishment in Washington, D.C. that they work for us. They do not work for K Street, and they must close the southern border before they do anything else in public policy. It's a travesty what happened several days ago.
Well, that's not what's actually happening, though, Kevin. You know that. I mean, you've had, before the border was even mentioned, you've had the Inflation Reduction Act passed, you've had the Fiscal Responsibility Act passed, you've had forgiveness of student debt, you've had the CHIPS Act passed, the Green Energy Tax Credit passed, and you just had money to Ukraine pass, $95 billion foreign aid bill, and we still do not have any new security at the southern border, Kevin. What is happening in these meetings that the Republicans are needing to roll over for some reason and change direction, which is what just happened?
Well, in spite of to your point, and that's precisely the point, Maria, in spite of the fact that several times Speaker Mike Johnson said he was not going to talk about Ukraine funding to any other place until we secured the southern border, he got rolled. And what happens in Washington, D.C., as I've learned, Maria, unless you come in here with a steel spine, is that K Street lobbyists, frankly, the GOP Senate leadership, in particular Leader McConnell, just twist arms. And Mike Johnson, who's a good, virtuous man, simply bowed to that pressure. And so the good news, I always want to link back to something hopeful, is that a majority of House Republicans voted against this nonsense. So in the medium and long term, I'm very optimistic about the conservative base eventually taking over the Washington establishment. But in the short term, as you point out very rightly, the American people are suffering. We're spending $1,300 per household to finance all of that aid to Ukraine when, lamentably, the Ukrainians cannot win this war, even with all of this aid. What we're calling for at Heritage, Maria, is what you're calling for every day in your show, which is an understanding of very sober reality that this country is weaker than it has ever been. It's not irreversible. We can fix it, but we have to start changing business as usual in Washington if we want to do that.
Well, I mean, every time I raise this with lawmakers, they say, look, Maria, the bottom line is we need a new president. We can't do anything until the election. They are feeling, basically handcuffed. in terms of a change in leadership. That's the only way they feel that they could actually make a difference on the border.
Well, I think that that's partially true. And I certainly agree with the fact that we need to upgrade the person who's in the White House, but also think it's a cop-out, if I may be so blunt.
Yeah.
And it's a cop-out because Mike Johnson has two great gifts from above, his authenticity and his communication ability. And as I have suggested publicly as a friend, they need to go actually not just run on this issue, campaign on this issue. They need to do a border tour from California to Texas, highlighting the problems there, and actually be willing to do political battle with the other side. That's what the American people are looking for. And frankly, I find it disgusting and cowardly that Washington GOP establishment is unwilling to fight on behalf of closing the southern border for Americans.
And in terms of these protests today, do you think that could anything be done if in fact we learn that it is Soros-funded groups behind some of this?
Well, something can be done, and most likely, given your wonderful exchange with my friend Congresswoman Tenney, it's going to take electoral upgrades. It's going to take better men and women in office. But what's going to have to happen, Maria, is a complete upending of the American higher education system. And that there are two things I'll mention. The first is there have to be new entrants like the University of Austin in Texas, like what Hillsdale has done for nearly 2 centuries. But there also has to be a public policy response. And this goes back to the point I just made about political cowardice. Conservative members of the House and Senate, whenever they have the strong majorities they promise us they're going to have to tear out, root and branch every single part of the U.S. Department of Education. It's bad enough that these protests are happening. It's even worse that you and I and your audience are funding them. Our members of Congress have to have the courage to take that on when they have the power they tell us they're going to get.
All right, we will leave it there. Kevin, good to see you. Thanks very much for all of that. Kevin Roberts joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Good to see you.